Everybody, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to us on one of the podcasting sites, please like, subscribe, share. If you're listening to us on the YouTube, please do the same thing, like, subscribe, share. If you are listening to us on one of the radio stations, we thank you for listening. And again, obviously, you can't like, subscribe, and share, but tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, whoever you can get your hands on. We really appreciate it. We're trying to get this out to as many people as possible. Today we have Teresa Harlow on. She is an author, a speaker, and a collaboration champion. What is that, by the way? Before we even get into it, what is a collaboration champion?
Well, so it's maybe my own phrase that I coined, but I champion the cause of collaboration between
Okay,
people.
gotcha. Okay, hey, no, that's all right. So she is a collaboration champion, and she does have that book out, which we're going to be talking about in depth in this interview. It's Combative to Collaborative, the co-parenting code. We're going to talk about that. So, Teresa, first of all, thanks so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it today.
Hey, thanks, Rob, for having me.
Combative and collaboration, the co-parenting code. What made you want to write this book, and why do you feel like it's important in general?
Yeah, so Rob, my son's father and I divorced when our son was 6.
Right.
He's 28 now.
Oh,
So we've been through this journey for the last 21 years, going on 22 years, I guess. And we came through it pretty well. And it didn't start off that way.
mhm.
But in that moment where we made the decision to split, my ex-husband, or my husband at the time, said to me, Teresa, you know you're going to miss half of your son's life. And I really hadn't contemplated us divorcing in that way. Cause I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not divorcing my son. I'm divorcing you. And he's like, well, we're gonna share parenting. We're gonna split time. I want joint custody. And I said, well, of course. And then it occurred to me that means half of the time goes to him. So I wanted to set out solving my
Mhm.
problem was how it started. Well, I couldn't lose out on half of the parenting experience because I had really spent a fair amount of time getting pregnant. I didn't want to give it up just because we were splitting. And I was like, well, he and I really didn't get along when we were together. So, what could I do to tackle that problem? Because we would have to be able to talk and communicate and share the same space together without making everyone in our lives miserable, which was what was happening.
Mhm.
And I reflected on something my mom had told me well, she told me two things that really kind of came to mind. The first was, if you don't have something nice to say, don't
Don't
say
say.
anything, right? And we all know that, but my son's father and I had long since abandoned that principle and had started to say a lot of really mean things to each other.
Mm.
And on top of that, then taking that same principle a step deeper with what my mom had raised me to to understand with interacting with others. She said, treat others the way you want to be treated. I was like, well, okay, maybe I can do that. I mean, I can't figure out how he wants to be treated, but I certainly know what I want someone to say to me. I
Right.
want, I know how I want someone to speak to me or treat me. So I should be able to start with that. So this principle is what I based my collaboration and all of my engagements with my son's father from that point going forward, so that I could then be in the same place as him, he could be in the same place as me, and we could share parent moments together and continue to collaborate to raise our son respectfully and in a positive way. As our son got older, people started saying to me, wow, I really appreciate what you've done. We can be around both of you. It's comfortable. I really wish my parents would have done this for me when I was growing up because they divorced. Or I wish I could do this for my son or daughter because we've divorced. My ex and I have divorced. And I'm like, wow, I could really help people learn how to do this, because it wasn't that hard. I didn't like do anything crazy. It was just basic stuff we all learned as kids that maybe we've lost touch of.
Yeah.
So that was really the idea.
So, does it take like a special person? Does it depend? I'm not going to ask you what happened in that's up to you if you want to bring that out or not.
Yeah,
Regardless of that, does it take like a special person to really accomplish this? Because, whether the person cheated on the other person, whether,
sure.
they
Right.
did something really even more insane than that. There's some really crazy, whacked out people in both sexes
Yeah.
right now in
Well,
the world. Go ahead.
yeah, I would say there are some disqualifiers.
Hmm.
A short list of those, things that probably won't work real well for two people to co-parent, involve things like physical abuse of, each other or the child or anyone really. If this person is physically abusive or violent, then you're probably not on stable ground for collaborating. They aren't, and you're not really safe to do so necessarily. If the person's engaged in criminal behavior, that's another thing that's going to really make it difficult for you to share space and conversations with this person. They got some issues to work out. And likewise, addictions can be very difficult to navigate. And the person really needs to seek help if they have addictions before they can move forward with any kind of relationship success. But on the other side of that, Rob, I'd say a lot of people think they can't do this, and they so can.
Hmm.
And I had a friend who started to preview my book as I started to write it, and I asked him to take a look at it. And he had been divorced for a while and co-parenting with his ex. And he said, this sounds great, but I don't think we could have done this because neither of us could get past the hurt toward each other. Like what you're saying, maybe there was adultery involved, not necessarily in their case, but whatever the hurt, the root
Yeah.
cause was, it was too much for them to overcome. And I said, you know what, let me take that away and I'm going to figure that out. And I thought about it and really kind of backwards engineered how I got there, even though we didn't have these really extreme situations in our particular relationship. I did kind of take it through step by step how I got there. And it was like, you know what? I didn't ask myself, what does he expect of me? I didn't ask myself I didn't require him to apologize to me or me to apologize to him. I didn't ask him for forgiveness. We just moved forward. And that may sound like an oversimplification, but frankly, if people can focus on being good parents and stop focusing on fixing the relationship that they're in with this other person, because they've already decided to dissolve the romantic relationship, anything related to that romantic relationship, you no longer need to consume yourself with. So if you're hurt over, for instance, a cheating scenario, well, you're not going to be with them romantically. You're still going to want to co-parent with them though, because regardless, if you don't do that together, you're not going to have the parenting experience or the parenting success that you want. And you really need both of you in the game to get the benefit of that.
What are like the keys that you would tell people that are trying to do this, whatever hurt they've been involved in, to make this successful in general?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to commit to what you want. Commit to being a good parent, because that sets your focus, right? So commit to it and then create the circumstances that'll enable that. And circumstances like how you split your time up, how you decide to communicate with one another. Are you going to communicate in regular conversations on the phone? Are you going to set a few minutes aside each time you take the child back and forth between homes? unable to do that and need to do it all in email. You have to decide what you're capable of accomplishing and maybe start with that. And then down the road, it can always grow into something, more. So if you can't bring yourself to have civil conversations together, don't force that until you can gain some trust with each other as parents. And that's not trust, again, in terms of the romantic relationship or as a formerly married couple. It's trust in their parenting. So start with small steps and build on that as you have small successes.
Talk about that as far as the child in this scenario, and how did because you involved your son in this at an early age. How do
Yeah.
you make sure that the child, whether it's a son or a daughter, really gets on board with this, and you try to make it kind of as comfortable as possible for the child, because it's going to be tough for them regardless of, with the parents breaking up.
Yep, it is. And you can certainly be a champion for the cause by making sure that you're respecting the idea that they deserve two parents in their life. So always keeping that in mind. What does that mean in terms of how you interact with this other person and how you demonstrate those behaviors to your child? Because they're watching. They're always watching, whether they, as they get older, they may act like, oh, I'm not going to be anything like my parents. We all know how we grow through that. And eventually we go, geez, mom was right. Just like I'm going and saying that right here with you, right? I'm saying my mom taught me this. And so anyway, you can start with the basic things, which we all have heard. Don't talk badly about an ex. But it goes much further than that. There are subtleties in making sure that you actively make sure that child engages with the other parent. Ask them to get a card for their parents' birthday. Make sure you give them the opportunity to give a gift, because it's good for them to see that and have that opportunity to have the other parent open a gift and see their face light up and thank them for it, so that the child learns to give and receive and sees that they should be doing that for their other parent. And sometimes the kids will want to protect that parent. Maybe they overheard that mom cheated on dad or vice versa, so they feel protective. And it's our job as the other parent to say, look, that's between us adults. That doesn't have anything to do with you and shouldn't impact your relationship with your parent, your other parent. And I think sometimes it's hard for divorcing couples to do that, because again, you go back to that hurt.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I want them to be mad at, the other parent. You want somebody on your side, right? But look, that's just not going to work in your favor. It may sound like it's going to in the short term, but it's not going to foster a collaborative spirit between you. So down the road, when you need their cooperation, you're going to be less likely to get it if you've made the road hard for them to do it. So it's not just about making sure that you definitely want your child to have the benefit of both parents, but this benefits you just as much as it benefits them, to make sure that the other parent is involved. You have another person on your team, and you don't have this constant battling back and forth over some of the smallest things.
I've heard many things about the divorce rate going so high right now. Not just this year, but in the past few years and even before that, it's just growing steadily up. Why do you feel like that is? Do you feel people are getting married too young? Is it a social media thing? Is it addictions to alcohol, pornography? What is it?
Maybe a little bit of all of those. Uh, you know, I mean, I think that long ago it was a lot less acceptable, right, for people to
Sure.
get divorced, and maybe we put more stock in our in our religious beliefs, and even those have become more progressive. They're a little more
Yeah.
lenient in allowing for divorced couples to continue their faith and whatnot. So that probably impacts some people. Families have become more accepting of it. I think it hasn't even been, I feel like last year sometime, and you'd have to check this to see if it's been longer, because you know how the dog years have been for the last couple of years, right? This may have been 7 years ago, but I remember reading not that long ago that India just approved divorce as
Mm.
a legal option. So it's just a natural progression in our culture, worldwide, in acceptance that maybe this human experience isn't always designed to mean that two people stay together forever. That's not necessarily everyone's stance. And for those that I think it's more of, for those that are lucky enough to find the right scenario for them the first time, I applaud them. And for those that maybe grow into a better relationship with someone that maybe they didn't necessarily start there with, I applaud them too. But it doesn't always serve our happiness. And it's, one thing I think is that we've come to realize it's not necessarily best to stay together just for the kids. There's a lot of psychologists that will tell you, this is not uh, better emotionally for the children, because I mean, if you think about it, what are you modeling for them? What's the behavior they're seeing? They're seeing two people that don't get
Fighting.
along, maybe don't love each other, and they're staying together anyway. So they're martyring their happiness, or
Mm.
they're making life miserable for everyone around them. At what cost?
That's true.
So I think in some instances, you might say it's a stroke of sanity to move forward from misery to a happier place. But I do believe that every effort should be made to save a marriage before you abandon it, particularly if you've made the commitment to have kids together, because they didn't choose this and you did choose to be parents.
Can you talk about what the key is to a happy divorce? Because it seems like you've went through that and still are going through that, as far as there's no stress, and maybe I'm off base, but there's not as much stress, I'll say, and there's not as much anxiety that a lot of people go through. So what is the key to a happy divorce and not having that kind of stress and anxiety?
I would say that it's focusing on what you really want out of life. Do you want happiness? What does that look like to you? Does it look like fighting with your ex for the next 10 or 15 years until your kids are grown, or forever, because when they're grown there's still situations where you'll be together? Or does it look differently than that? And then designing your life around what it is you actually want. And it doesn't all just click into place magically. It takes intention. You got to choose very intentionally, like where are you going to live in relation to an ex, so that it makes it easier for both of you to be the best parents you can be. Because not only do you want to be a good parent, you want the other parent to be the best parent. Because why wouldn't you? You don't want your other parent to be a crappy parent. I mean, that doesn't benefit anyone. So does
No,
that answer your question?
yeah, no, I agree with that. We're going to move on to some audience questions. What do you hope people learn from this book?
So I hope that, and let me just start by saying this is my second book on the topic. Okay. And the first one was more, I'll call it our story. It was how we specifically chose to co-parent, but it didn't get into a lot of the obstacles and very difficult situations that people encounter. I would say that the reason I wrote this second book was to address that. Just because you're on combative footing with someone doesn't mean you can't change course. You can correct course. And even if it's been 10 years in a bad place with someone, there's still an opportunity to redeem that relationship with each other. And I believe firmly that if you can choose intentionally to do that and focus on what it is you want out of your life, that you can move any relationship forward. Look, I've used the principle of the golden rule that I espouse in this book to solve relationships or improve relationships with my ex-husband, to improve the relationships with some family members, even with coworkers. This isn't just something that you use in co-parenting. If you were to adopt this principle in your life, you can improve literally any relationship. Even like, let's just say you got to call customer service and complain about something that you're experiencing. You can use the same principle. It's all about treating others the way you want to be treated, and doing that every time you have an interaction with someone. So that's one of the things I hope that people will take from this book, is that it transcends just their co-parenting relationship to that with their kids, their family, their broader community, you know, and their work life and whatever. And it's never too late. It's never too late to tackle it.
Right. I agree. And let's end with this. Where can people get the book and find more about you, Teresa?
Sure. They can get the book from my website, teresaharlow.com, or it's available on Amazon. And if you have a favorite bookstore, you can ask them. They can order it through Ingram and get it in the store for you as well.
Again, if people want to get the book by Teresa Harlow, Combative to Collaborative, the Co-Parenting Code, definitely check it out.